Hello, Ed. Marchiselli. How you doing?
Great, Jim. How are you?
I am living the dream, and I'm very excited that you have asked me to host your podcast at the Seal. This is really exciting stuff. Thank you so much.
I'm excited to have you do it. Yeah, proud to have you do it.
Yeah, before we get into the Seal and how you got to where you are today, I just want everyone to know that on a regular basis, we're going to be putting podcasts on here from people in the industry, in home service that have done amazing things. So this is a great place to learn. And also in each episode, Ed, we're going to talk about the Seal and how that's important for home service professionals, and they should be using that process because of the authority, the credibility. The homeowner really wants to feel safe, and there's no reason why any home service company shouldn't be employing the Seal.
Right. I agree.
So how did you get into the Seal business, my friend?
So I actually was in the home service industry first.
Yeah.
And I had an HVAC company, mostly a little bit of plumbing, electrical, like 80% HVAC, all residential repair and replacement, so no new construction. We had 165 employees, 19,000 residential service contracts.
Wow.
So at the time, this was over 20 years ago, but we were the biggest guys in our town, um, and we were pretty proud of ourselves, and we thought we were doing pretty well. We were doing well. And if you asked our salespeople or our selling technicians, we had a combination of both. We had a super high close rate, 90%. So this was, again, over 20 years ago. We implemented a CRM system where we started tracking every call that came into the company. And I started looking at the data, and it didn't take too long to see that we were at like a 50% close rate, not a 90% close rate. And that other 40% was, if you ask the salespeople, was just they were people who were not in the market or they were cheap. And so I listened to that for a little while. And then Fridays were my slow day, relatively speaking. And one Friday, I decided, I was looking at the CRM system. I said, I'm going to start calling some of these customers that are still open in the system and find out why they haven't bought yet.
Mm.
And I started calling them, and I found out they had bought from somebody else. And so as the owner of the company, I asked them in a very non-confrontational way. I said, do you mind just sharing with me what your decision criteria was and why you didn't choose us and why you chose somebody else? And we were the big guys in town. We had a great reputation. So nobody said that they didn't trust us. They said, we felt like if we went with you, we were going to get a quality service and you weren't going to screw us. But the other guys, frankly, tried a little harder than you and convinced us that they were at least as good as you. And in some cases they were cheaper, and that's easy to say, oh, the customer went with the cheaper bid. And sometimes it was really hard to hear that they paid more than we were quoted. So we not only lost, but we lost to somebody who was charging more than us, which is, the worst. So talking to them, I realized that, it wasn't enough for us to be trusted and liked. We needed a differentiator, because the companies that are like the good guys out there that are the best at what they do, they just assume that and we did too. You just assume that the customers know that. And we don't do as good a job at building that trust and selling the customer as the little guys do. And some of the guys that don't have the customer's best interest in mind, they do a better job selling than we did and building trust. So I said, I need a differentiator, not only something that's meaningful, because I can say it and they can either believe me or not. It's got to be verifiable. Not only that they're going to believe me, but that our competitors just can't say, yeah, we do that too. And so at this same time I'm figuring this out, we're interviewing people from our competitors. And we interviewed a guy that had 2 burglary convictions, defrauding the elderly, and credit card fraud. And he worked for our biggest competitor, who on their website in bold letters say, we background check every employee. 3 weeks later, we interviewed somebody from a home service plumbing competitor that wanted to come work for us, rape and burglary conviction. So I'm like, okay, here's our differentiator, right? Yeah. So we actually background check. We we actually look at it, we care about it, and we don't hire people that have these kinds of records. And but I had a sales meeting, and I presented this to the sales team. I didn't share names or companies. I just said, hey guys, this is who we're competing against. And one of my salespeople said, that's fine to say that, but the other guys are saying it too. He says, first of all, I can't prove we do it. And second of all, there's nothing to stop the other guys from saying, yeah, we do that too. And that's where the light bulb for the seal went on. And I said, I need something like the Good Housekeeping seal of approval, but for my company and my people. And because there were, plenty of carrier dealers out there, so we couldn't differentiate on equipment. Mm-hmm. So, it needed to be our people, our company, and that sort of thing that we had to differentiate. So I looked for it. I couldn't find it. And I decided to start the seal 16 years ago.
I have a similar story. Can I tell my story about CheckAPro? Because you and I are like brothers from a different mother, I guess. So 20 years ago, almost 20 years ago, 19 years ago, 2005, I started CheckAPro in a small, well, it's not a small town anymore, Katy, Texas. And it was originally Katy Pros, and I went to CheckAPro. And I came from the consumer side because I was a homeowner. I got screwed over by contractors. And so I created this system where we check insurance, licenses, and references on all of the contractors listed on what became checkapro.com now that we've taken this nationally. So we've got companies across the country like you do. I'll give you credit, though. You went a lot deeper than we did. We check insurance, licenses, and references. And in the state of Texas, to be quite honest with you, that's a big deal because most home service companies, as you probably know, don't need a license to operate, or even insurance for that matter. So it was really important that my neighbors had quality contractors. Sure. And I find it interesting that all these years later, you and I come together, we're working together now, and our business ideas were similar, but we came from the two different sides, the consumer side for me and the home service side for you. And we both want what's best for the homeowner.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. And, while I was having those conversations with the homeowner, some of them were happy with their decision, but more than half of them said they expressed that they wished they had gone with us, that they got sold a bill of goods, slick salesperson, and they wished they had gone with us. And that was tough to hear, that, and a lot of times they would end up spending more money because we'd have to redo the work that they already, paid for to fix it.
So Ed, tell me in simple terms why a home service provider, regardless of what they do, whether it's soft wash or roofing or HVAC, plumbing, electrical, why they should be under the seal, right? Having the seal as that authority, that identification, the badge, the whole thing. I mean, I know you went through what you went through years ago, but in short, explain why every home service professional should become more professional with the seal.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's really twofold. The first one is to protect their company, their what they've worked for their whole lives, and to protect their employees from a new hire or somebody that's going to potentially hurt them, and to protect their customers. Because if an employee hurts a customer, that's 11 o'clock news story. Yeah. Statistically more likely they're going to hurt another employee, because that's just happens more often than them hurting customers. And those are wrongful hire lawsuits, wrongful retention lawsuits. That means you should have known, you didn't do a background check, you didn't do it right, or you did it but you had a hiring manager who really needed a warm body in the van, and they hired him anyway. And then they go, one guy shows up, he's a little hungover, moving slow, starts verbal argument. Next thing you know, there's a fight, and one of them has a history of violence, and those are wrongful hire lawsuits. They're won 87% of the time. The average award's $1.8 million. So that's a good enough reason to do it. But we have taken this thing that is the right thing to do anyway, and we've helped build a sales and marketing program for the contractor. We call it like the building the bridge to like and trust. So I've heard you talk about people buy from people they like and trust, but we have to earn that, both of those. So the seal of security and confidence is something that helps build that, not only that trust, but that likability. And so the annual background checks that we do, and the badges that we issue, signifying that they've passed a background check, help build the trust. And the bios, so the customers, and it's integrated with their CRM, so they don't have to do anything. The customer, our member's customer gets an email or a text saying, this is who's coming, here's the image of their badge. It has not only a written bio, but a video bio. So they have not only seen this person's face, they've seen it on a badge, signifying that they're safe. They know something professionally and personal about this person. And then they've heard their voice, they've heard them speaking. So the most common feedback we get from our clients or their employees is when they show up at the door, the customer opens the door and they make eye contact and they say, where do I know you from? Because we've checked all of those boxes in the back of their mind for familiarity. I've seen their face. I know something about them. I've heard their voice. And that's the first thing that occurs to them is, where do I know you from?
You're singing my song because, I do video podcasts and direct response radio. And I always say, you want to be familiar. And in some instances, and some of the things I actually do, when you show up to the door, they already know you. You're not just familiar. And so being familiar is important. People also purchase products that they're familiar with. So the more you advertise and brand, the more you are familiar with it. So if Coca-Cola comes out with a new product or Apple comes out with a new product, you're more likely to buy that product. You are a product/service. You need to become familiar and trustworthy so they open up. People buy on emotion. People buy with their heart, not just their pocketbook. And they may not buy from you if they don't trust you or like you. I'll just tell you a quick story. Years ago, I was in the market for a specific car. Let's say it was a Ford. Go to the dealership. I see the car I want, but I didn't like the salesperson. I was willing to leave that dealership and go to another one and buy a like car for more money because I didn't want to buy a car from that person, because we're freaking human, for better or for worse. So it's so important. Remember, humans are human. They buy with their heart, and it's not you, the person who's trying to get in the door and sell. You have to remember that it's all about them, the consumer. The most important person, and you've heard me say this, most important person in the room is each of us. So remember that. Hold back and give them what they want. They want the safety, the security. They want to know that you're not going to beat them up, rape them, right? In home service, like I said, when I started my business, one of the reasons why people flock to our website at Checker Pro is because they didn't trust the contractor. People don't trust contractors. Contractors will agree. They're like, yeah, people don't trust us. When people come out of prison, many of them can't get jobs. So they start a business, often as a handyman or a painter.
Yep.
You know all about that, don't you?
Absolutely. And people say, oh, customers are cheap or they care about money. Every transaction is emotional. That is either going to make, whatever they're doing is either going to make them feel good, or they have a fear of making the wrong decision, whether it's paying too much or picking the wrong company or the wrong product. There's a mix of emotions, and sometimes it can be, the positive and the combination of the positive and the negative. So, and even when it is rooted in financial, it's still emotional because they're emotional about their money.
Yeah, it's almost always emotional. We're an emotional being. And I'll tell you one thing, if I could go back to college, I studied marketing. And what's interesting because I majored in marketing with a minor in communication, and that's exactly what I'm using today. I'm using my marketing and sales skills
Yeah.
in the communication world. But I would go back today and study some psychology, probably at least minor in it.
Yep.
When you can understand what your spouse, your children, your customers, your prospects, your boss are thinking and how they operate, you can navigate better. And I find as I mature through life, it's a lot easier now than when I was 21. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. Yeah. That's why the disc analysis is so valuable, to understand both how you interact with your family and your coworkers, but also your customers.
Yeah. One of the things I love about what you do at the Seal Ed is the ID badges. So many small companies don't have their own ID badges. And what's really interesting is we did the same thing. We were almost like a franchisor for these guys, right? We're like, look, we'll do this, this, and this for you. You don't have to worry about it. We have the machine. We'll print it. So
Yep.
come in, we'll take your picture. We put the Chucka Pro logo on it. The Seal does the same thing. And it means a lot when you show up as a home service provider. I like to call you guys home service professionals. When you show up, you want to look professional. You don't want to, ripped, greasy shirt with no ID. You don't want to look like a convict. You really don't. Okay.
Yeah.
And so you want to show up in a nice, clean shirt, clean shaven if you can. And when you have the ID badge, all of a sudden your authority goes up, but the credibility goes up. The safety factor goes up in the homeowner's mind.
Yeah. And, when I was 20 years ago, we had our own badge printer when I was in the HVAC system. So we had 165 employees, so we could print our own badges, but they were pretty meaningless. They just meant that we had a badge printer. Our badges are issued by the background check, the seal by the background check company. And it's got the seal of security and confidence on it. And it's got check marks with the license, insurance, and the background check. And you can scan the QR code on the badge, and it no personal information, but shows they passed the background in the last 12 months. And that the fact that it's issued by the third party and that the client, our members can tell their customers that, hey, I didn't print this badge or order it on the internet. This is issued by the background check company. And then they also use it to get reviews. So there's a QR code on the back that they use to, ask the customer to do a review that's linked to Google.
And that's important too, because everybody wants as much value as they can get. I know it's very affordable to be part of the seal, and it's great to have a badge and separate yourself, but to be able to further that and get more credibility through reviews and hopefully get more business because of it. So if I'm a home service professional and I join the seal, how can I really leverage this to get more sales?
Yeah, so the beautiful thing is that we're integrated with almost every major CRM. And even when we're not, we have a team that can help them replicate our stuff within their CRM. But for most of our clients, it's just integrated out of the box. When they dispatch a technician to a house or a salesperson, the customer automatically gets an email and a text with their badge and a description on why they're the safe choice. And then it's got their bio and their video bio, so that when they show up at the house, there is that familiarity and the like and the trust is already, those seeds are already planted. And then we give them sales and marketing materials that they can use with the customer. There's a We Care document that has their logo and ours on it and their badge and explains why they're the safe choice. The front door safety tips was like we used that. We originally created it for our clients to build that trust with their clients and help them win business. But what we didn't, we should have expected it, but we didn't, is that our clients are telling us that it has legs. So they'll give the homeowner the front door safety tips and say, hey, we know we're not the only company, we're safe choice, on background check, but you've got other vendors coming to your house for other services. We just want to make sure you're safe. And they give them the front door safety tips. And it's just, it's not about the seal. It's about common sense safety tips. And it's got their logo and ours on it. But what happens is Mrs. Jones shares it with her daughters and her next door neighbors. And they get calls 6 months later when somebody needs a plumber or a roofer, and they say, yeah, my neighbor shared these front door safety tips with me. I thought it was great. I held on to it. I shared it with a couple people. And when I needed your service, I thought of you guys. So there's a lot of sales and marketing materials that go along with it. And then for the reviews, there is no better time than when you have just solved that customer's problem and you're still in front of them. Once you leave, their phone rings, they get emails, they've got to pick the kids up at soccer. When you've completed the job, you ask them if they're happy and if they provided 5-star level of service. If the customer says yes, say, would you mind taking 1 minute to do a review for me? Of course, they're going to say yes. They just unclip their badge and hand it to the customer. There's a QR code on there. It'll take you less than a minute to leave me a review on Google. And the customer does it 95% of the time. We also are integrated with their CRM. So if they don't leave one there, they'll get an email and or text asking for it. But there's nothing better than asking for it from the badge.
No, I agree. Always immediately ask for that next whatever. So if you want to sell something to a customer, the best time to sell is right after they just bought. So it's the same thing with getting a review. Ed, I would imagine that your company, The Seal, brings more value the smaller the company is, smaller the home service company is, because the way I picture what you can offer the smaller guy, because this was the case for my business too, is things that they wouldn't think of or wouldn't invest in that you have invested in. Do you find that's true?
Well, it's kind of all over the board, really. Like we have a client with 700 employees, and we have several that are 150 or more. But a lot of those were smaller when they joined. So the 700 employee customer had 50 employees when they started with us, and the 150 person companies had 35 or 30. But we have hundreds of small businesses, 1, 2, 3, less than 5 employees, and I would say that the small guys are more successful with it because they have more control and they have the vision. So when you have a big 500 or 700 person company, it's just harder to control your employees and get them to talk about, the seal or the badges and the value of it and that sort of thing. When you've got a 5-person company, they're all over it. They're sometimes the owner's the one going out selling. They just know every day what's going on, whereas the bigger companies tend to lose sight of, and they got a lot of stuff going on. They get the value out of it too, but the little guys tend to use it more.
Absolutely. So if you do a criminal check on an individual that is at a company and it doesn't come back well, what happens?
So we have a published criteria on our website that if they don't pass that criteria, that they will not get a badge. And I always tell prospective clients and new clients, if they don't pass our criteria, they are a risk to your company. They have been convicted of a violent or a theft-related crime recently. And I tell them, just because they passed our background check doesn't mean you should hire them. Because we don't disqualify because of discrimination laws and some government things. Like we don't disqualify on drugs or DUIs or that sort of thing. So obviously, if you got a guy with 2 DUIs and he's going to drive your vehicle, you might not want to hire him. Doesn't mean we wouldn't fail that guy on the DUIs, because he's not. Well, he could be a danger on the road, but he's not a direct danger to our client and their home. Or necessarily a possession of marijuana or that sort of thing doesn't necessarily make him a danger. But if they've got a history of that, they may not want to hire them. But if they don't pass our written criteria, they will not get a badge. The seal mail will not go out. They can't ask for reviews. They can't, it's just, they don't pass go, don't collect $200. They it does not meet requirements.
Yeah. And that's got to come up here and there, because I know the industry well. I've been working in it for 20 years. And that's one reason why the seal exists, to protect the homeowner, to protect the business owner. And ultimately, I would think the employee should feel pretty good about wearing that badge, right?
They do, yeah. And the other thing we didn't talk about too is our background checks. We repeat them every year. So the employee has an anniversary date, and I won't say exactly where. We just signed up recently a company in the Mid-Atlantic that had probably about 50 employees, and we background and the owner said we've already background checked everyone, so there's not going to be any problems. So we did the background checks, and everybody passed but one. And this guy had in the last 6 months, was arrested for trying to lure a 12-year-old girl into his car. And he was convicted. So of course, they reduced the charges, and he was convicted of reckless endangerment of a child. But the company had no idea that this had happened. He call in sick, on Monday until he bonds out of jail, and then when he goes to court, he takes a vacation day. And they literally had no idea that this had happened. So that's bad stuff. I mean, that's not only bad, and on the face of it, but that if that happens in the company car, or if that 12-year-old girl was at a client's home and like he was interacting with that child, and then the next day sees her walking down the sidewalk, she's more likely to interact with him. She knows she saw him at her house. It's wrong on so many levels. So it makes me feel good that we can kind of put a stop to stuff like that.
Yeah, as the business owner, even though you might not be the perpetrator, you will be sued if something happens to that 12-year-old girl.
Yeah,
I guarantee it. And you got deeper pockets. They are going after you first, probably financially.
The good thing about the third party too is as your company grows and the owner has the best intentions, and they finally let go of the reins and they hire a general manager, right, or a service manager, and they, everyone says, you got to work on your business, not for your business. So you're trying to delegate, you're trying to give these people stuff, but they're never going to care about your company as much as you do. And you got hiring managers who are under pressure. And if you don't have a third party, like you can hire a background check company and they can do the background checks, but that hiring manager is reviewing him, and he really needs somebody where he buys into the story on how I didn't really do it, and I was the one guy to get wrongly convicted, and they go ahead and hire him anyway. It happens all the time. But with the SEAL, they don't get a badge. They're not on the roster. They don't get a badge. You can't. There's nowhere to hide.
Yeah, they're not on the team.
Right.
Not on the SEAL team.
Right.
And that's really important. This has been awesome. I'm so excited to be working with you, Ed, and the SEAL, and all of the members of the SEAL, and anyone who's interested in learning more. Details are in this podcast, in the notes, in the description. Feel free to reach out to Ed and his team, and I'm sure he'd love to talk to you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm looking forward to a long relationship.
Thanks, Ed. Appreciate it, my friend.
Thanks, Jim. Good talking to you.